vetted. I'm sure you've heard of him. He says that Operation Economic Outcast is designed to cut Tehran off from the global economy, warning that countries continuing to do business with Iran could also face U.S. secondary sanctions. Washington is also calling on its allies, and particularly China, which is Iran's biggest oil customer, to join the pressure campaign. Still staying with the United States, and still looking at the Middle East, the United States has officially removed Syria from its list of state sponsors of terrorism, ending a designation that has been in place since 1979. The move follows a 45-day congressional review and is part of the Trump administration's efforts to deepen ties with Syria's new government under President Ahmed al-Shara, you see on your screen there. Washington says Damascus has taken positive steps to distance itself from terrorism, while the delisting removes a major obstacle to foreign investment and Syria's reintegration into the global financial system. Then we come home to the African continent. We're looking at Uganda. Uganda has pledged around 1,200 troops to a proposed international security force for Gaza. And that is as Burundi, another East African country, is considering joining the mission too. So military officials from both East African nations visited Israel last week for talks about the deployment, which forms part of US President Donald Trump's Gaza ceasefire plan. The proposed 20,000 strong force would help monitor the ceasefire, train Palestinian police, as well as secure humanitarian aid. But international troop commitments do remain quite short of that 20,000 target. That being said, we will keep our eyes and ears across all of those developments. But it is time now for us to move on to our newspaper review. As always, we begin here in Nigeria on the front page of This Day. And this morning, This Day newspaper does lead with the NNPC and its partners, SNEPCO, ESSO, and NAGIB, moving this $21 billion Bonga Southwest Aparo deep water project towards final investment decision. The project is expected to peak at 175,000 barrels of oil per day, and it's also expected to attract significant investment into Nigeria. Still staying with This Day, we also see NDC Vice Presidential candidate Rabiu Kwankwaso. He has criticized the APC's 2027 Presidential Campaign Council. He has described it as a continuation of the policies that he says have brought hardship to Nigerians. And still staying with This Day, we also see that the United States has imposed fresh sanctions on nearly 60 individuals, companies and vessels linked to Iran's military procurement and oil trade, as we discussed on the World Brief. And its picture headline does feature the flag off of the reconstruction of the 56.5-kilometer Ibadan-Ijebu-Ode road, featuring Ogun State Governor Prince Dapo Abiodun, as well as the Minister of Works Dave Umahi at the flag-off ceremony. It is Tuesday, so let's take a look at the advocate by Onikepo Braithwaite. She's looking at the Austrian elections recently. She's looking at the credibility, essentially, of the recently concluded Austrian governorship elections. And she does question comments also by FCT Minister Isom Wike on the election and concerns surrounding the Nigerian Bar Association's 2026 electoral process. Next up, we are looking at the Daily Trust, and it does say that the presidency is reviewing the composition of the APC's 2027 Presidential Campaign Council. This is following concerns over controversial names, some omissions, but also some other errors. The paper also says that Abdul Aziz Yari is expected to retain his position as Director General. This is according to the Daily Trust. Still staying with the Daily Trust, we also see that at least 30 worshippers abducted from 4 mosques in Niger State during Friday prayers have unfortunately reportedly been killed, with more than 60 people still missing. We're going to come back to that story in another paper. Let's take a look now at The Guardian, nevertheless, and it does say that a 5-day gridlock, as you can see in these pictures, linking major roads linking Delta and Edo states have disrupted businesses and stranded thousands of commuters, as well as trucks, with manufacturers estimating losses of more than 500 billion naira. Now, the New Telegraph, going back to that story we were talking about, does say that gunmen have released a video showing people believed to be among those abducted during those Friday prayers over in Dekara in Niger State. Amnesty International is calling on the authorities to urgently rescue the victims. The paper, the New Telegraph, also has the Trump administration preparing to revoke the business and tourism visas of up to 200,000 foreigners who have sought asylum in the United States. Now, we've got the Daily Times up next, and this morning it is looking at human rights, and Human Rights Writers Association has given the federal government 3 weeks to establish an independent judicial commission in order to investigate the alleged killings, disappearances, torture, and arbitrary arrests taking place in the southeast of Nigeria. Next up, we are looking at Daily Independent, and it does say that Peter Obi has rejected Atiku Abubakar's proposal to restore fuel subsidy. He argues that subsidy removal should remain, but its savings must be properly managed and invested. So it sounds like he's aligned with the government on that one. The Punch does go on to take a look at terrorism, and it does say that terrorists are adopting new methods to finance their operations. This is including crowdfunding, proxy bank accounts, and SIM cards registered to deceased persons. We've got 2 British papers. Let's first take a look at The Guardian this morning. It is looking at British Prime Minister Andy Burnham, his response to Russian threats after the United Kingdom said that it would give Ukraine blueprints to make Storm Shadow missiles. The United Kingdom is also set to share classified weapons information with Ukraine in order to enable Ukraine to produce its own version of the Storm Shadow long-range cruise missile. This is designed jointly with France, and this is as Prime Minister Andy Burnham visited Kyiv on his first foreign trip as UK Prime Minister. Now, his trip on Monday was timed to coincide with Ukraine's 35th anniversary of independence from the Soviet Union, and it is the latest show of support from the United Kingdom towards Ukraine, as well as other European allies, and this is happening, well, some would say the support from the United States has been shaky and erratic. Then we wrap things up with the Financial Times, and it does have Donald Trump. You do see the pictures of the 2 leaders there, but it also has Trump pledging that he will increase tariffs on Canadian cars and car parts to 50% from the 1st of January. Those are your newspaper headlines and your world brief. Love to hear your thoughts.
Decision by Uganda to send troops to the Middle East. You see, we need to learn. Don't die in the hypocritical war America fights. I'll use that to take 2 stories. Uganda troops in the Middle East, and America now removing Syria from state sponsor of terror. Really? Okay. I'll take you back. 1981, something happened. Nigeria sent troops to Lebanon for peacekeeping mission. Okay. Because southern Lebanon used to be occupied by Palestinian Liberation Organization. So Israel bombed them, fought them out there.
Yes.
But all the splinter Shia groups formed together to form something called Hezbollah. So that was where you had the 80s crisis in that area, southern Lebanon, Israel. When Nigeria sent troops there, part of Unfil, there was a bombing that happened that killed Nigerian troops there. It was done by SLA, Southern Lebanon Army, which was a Christian-backed group by Israel. It was a Christian-backed militia group by Israel. What am I saying? You're just going to lead those Ugandan soldiers to the slaughter slab. And you're not going to get anything from it. Nigerian contingent, my memory was led by the likes of Oluri, that ran for governor in Ogun State, General Tunji Oluri. You are not going to get anything. You are just going to be used as pawn in America's hypocrisy. The same America that is now saying Al-Sharaa, a foremost leader of Al-Qaeda splinter group, a terrorist, is no longer a terrorist because he helped you to fight your greatest battle with Bashar al-Assad. You are now removing Al-Sharaa and Syria as state sponsor of terror. Really? In the same Syria where the Druze were being killed in Sueda by government forces. So America does not see that government forces in Syria is perpetrating terrorism against the Druze population. As long as it's in their interest, they look away. Because they are using Al-Sharaa today, the killing of Druze, crime being perpetrated about the Druze population in Sweden and other parts does not matter. So is it the same America that the Board of Peace want to call you to send troops for? And you want to go and send Ugandan troops?
All right, okay. On the Ugandan front, let me make a case for Uganda because as a, what could be in it for them on the positive side as a nation is that they'll then be seen from being a regional power. They have intervened, their troops have intervened in regional wars. You can talk about the DRC, you can talk about Somalia, to being big players on the international front. Another advantage or benefit that might be seen would be that they then have the opportunity to learn, to gain skills, transfer of skills and experiences by working alongside these more established, grounded troops from across the border. So those are some of the persuasions that the Ugandan government might give for wanting to be a part of or sending troops to Gaza. Also, of course, it doesn't hurt to be in good standing with the United States when you talk about economic benefits. But that is where the real challenge lies. Yesterday, we were talking about the country, the African country that made alliance with the US to take in Liberia. Thank you very much. Liberia had agreed with the United States to take in some of their deportees. And one of the central parts of that was the benefit economically and how sometimes African nations trade that in exchange for almost a threat to their sovereignty and the interest of their own people. So whilst you can make an argument for, okay, maybe this is what Uganda is thinking by sending troops, the other side is that they also benefit very significantly from a US force-backed mission. And so that's another area that must be looked quite critically as to whether or not this is based on what the leaders in the country would gain from the United States by allying with a U.S. ally, which is Israel in this case. And so there are conversations there. There are for pros and against. As a leader of the nation, you're looking at, okay, what would benefit your country the most? But on the African continent, the consistent criticism has often been that leaders trade the interest economically, sovereignty-wise, of their people in exchange for benefits from the United States. And usually it is for a few government officials who would benefit, not even the people at large.
Okay, to save time and for the benefits of the students of international diplomacy, let me take two of the topics you have brought under the rubric of carrot and stick diplomacy, which is a major concept in studies of international diplomacy. What the Americans have adopted with regard to Iran is the stick end of the carrot and stick diplomacy with their declaration of the Operation Economic Outcast and their announcement of economic punishment for anybody who supports Iran against the United States. I don't think that the sanctions, additional sanctions as they are, that they are planning to announce will work because China is not going to support any sanctions by the United States. And I do not think that the United States will be interested in taking on China or other allies that may be doing business with Iran. At the end of the day, the bottom line, as I argued previously, is that it is the rest of the world that will pay. And also the United States itself, which is facing increased debt, where strategies to hold down bonds, the bond market, will seem not to be working. The immediate and long-term implications of that will be for us to consider when they emerge. Now, in the case of Syria, is the carrot end of it that is being applied. The Al-Sharaa, previously a designated, specially designated international terrorist, with the U.S. placing $10 million bounty on his head. But he helped the United States to get rid of al-Assad, who is now in Russia, in hiding more or less. So again, the U.S. is pursuing its own strategic interests by rewarding a man who has helped them. But it came with demands. One, al-Assad and his, is it HTS? ATS.
Al-Sharaa.
ATS.
Al-Sharaa is HTS, not al-Assad.
HTS of Al-Sharaa was required, one, to help fight ISIS, two, to help decimate all the cells of Iran-backed groups in that country by expelling Iranian influence, and then commitment to the 1974 Golan Heights disengagement, which would support Israel, and then the integration of the pro-US Syria Democratic Forces. Now, Ashara, having agreed to all of this, by last year, he was allowed to visit the United States. The first Syrian president since 1946 independence to visit the White House. And now, a year later, Syria has been removed from the blacklist of being a terrorist state. The other countries that are on that list will be Cuba, South Korea, and Iran. So 3 left. Syria has been removed because Syria behaved as a good ally. So this is about American imperialism all over. However, Ashara has 2 major issues to face: unity between the Alawite and the other groups, tribal factions, and then the fact that it has issues trapped between Turkey and Israel. So it's not as if it's an automatic thing that Syria is off the hook. So the Middle East remains very interesting. And of course, as for Uganda, Nigeria should not get involved in that board of peace. That is all we can say.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.